You've been deceived your whole life. Yes, you heard that right. Everything you've been told about happiness, success, and purpose has been a big lie. You've been led to believe that money, recognition, and material possessions are the keys to a fulfilling life. But have you ever stopped to think why, despite all you've achieved, you still feel a deep emptiness inside? That emptiness is not a coincidence. It is a sign that something crucial is missing, something you've been ignoring all this time. God has an urgent message for you today, a message that has been waiting patiently for you to hear. It's not about what you have or what you've accomplished, but about a much deeper truth that has been hidden from you by the distractions of the world. Have you wondered why, despite your successes, inner peace is still so hard to attain? It's because true peace and satisfaction do not come from what the world offers, but from a deeper connection, one that you've been seeking without even realizing it. Jesus is calling you now, and what he has to say can change your life forever. Do not ignore this opportunity. It is time to open your eyes to the reality you've been avoiding. The world has sold you a false idea of what it means to live fully, but the truth is that there is something much greater waiting for you. Something that cannot be bought with money or achieved by human effort. It is a divine gift that God wants you to receive today. This message is for you, yes, for you who are reading these words. It is no coincidence that you've come this far. God has brought you to this moment because he knows you are ready to receive his truth. A truth that can free your soul from the chains that have kept you trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction. But to receive it, you must be willing to listen, to open your heart, and let Jesus enter your life in a way you've never experienced before. So, I ask you, are you willing to discover the truth? Are you ready to leave behind the lies that have kept you imprisoned and embrace the abundant life that God has for you? If so, keep going, because what comes next is a message that can transform not only your present, but also your eternity. Jesus is waiting for you with open arms, and all you need to do is take the first step towards him. Don't miss this opportunity, because what you are about to discover could be the most important thing you hear in your entire life. From the very moment we wake up, God is by our side, watching over each of our steps. However, it is easy to get lost in the daily routine, isn't it? Often, we let daily tasks absorb all our attention, forgetting that God accompanies us every moment. That divine presence is like a gentle breeze that touches our soul, reminding us that we are not alone, even though the noise of the world tries to distract us. It is important to remember that just as a flower needs water to bloom, our soul needs the love and guidance of God to avoid withering under the scorching sun of life's challenges. When we face problems that seem insurmountable, it is easy to feel like we are fighting alone. But just as a flower leans toward the light, our souls must lean toward the presence of God, seeking his strength. In those moments of difficulty, it is essential to stop, breathe deeply, and remember that we are not alone in our struggles. God is always there, ready to offer us his support, his love, and his wisdom. No matter how busy we are, we must never forget that, like the flower needs water, our soul needs the constant presence of God to thrive and find peace. It is in the quietest moments, when we finally pause our busy minds, that we can feel God's presence most intensely. Imagine sitting in a park, surrounded by nature, and feeling the gentle breeze caressing your face. That is the moment when you can truly connect with the divine essence that has always been there, patiently waiting for you to turn towards it. Even though the world pushes you to keep running, it is vital to remember that true peace is found in that silent connection with God. And just as a flower absorbs every drop of water to stay alive, our soul absorbs God's presence to avoid withering amid the chaos. Many seek satisfaction in money and material achievements, but true satisfaction can only come from that spiritual connection. God is not absent when we are immersed in our daily worries. In fact, He is closer than we imagine, waiting for us to allow Him to fill that void that worldly things will never be able to fill. Just as a flower depends on water to avoid withering, we depend on the presence of God to avoid succumbing to life's pressures. It is in that act of stopping and recognizing His presence that we find the strength to keep going, renewed and at peace. It is easy to forget the importance of God's presence when we are caught up in the whirlwind of our daily responsibilities. But what if we took a moment each day to simply stop and reflect? Perhaps we would discover that, just as a flower blooms under the constant care of a gardener, our souls also bloom when we allow God to water our hearts with His love. No grand gestures are necessary, just a moment of pause, a deep sigh, a silent prayer. It is in those small acts where God's presence becomes more evident, reminding us that we are never truly alone. When we feel that our life is withering under the weight of our responsibilities, it is essential to remember that God is the source of all renewal. Just as a flower is reborn with every drop of water, our soul can also be reborn when we allow God's presence to enter our lives. Imagine for a moment that you are that delicate flower, in need of care and attention. God is that loving gardener, always ready to provide you with the water of life you need. Do not let the worries of the world keep you away from that source of life. Instead, seek His presence in every moment, and you will find the peace and strength your soul longs for. You may have felt like a withered flower at some point, without energy, without life. But God's presence has the power to revive even the most tired souls. You only need to open your heart and allow His love to touch you. In the midst of difficulties, when the world seems to darken, that is when we most need that divine connection. Just as the flower lifts its head toward the sun after the storm, you too can lift yours towards God and feel how His light dispels the darkness. That constant presence is what will give you the strength to keep going, no matter how difficult the circumstances may be. We search for answers in the wrong places, forgetting that God is already present in our lives, waiting for us to let Him act. It's like searching for water in a desert when we are on the edge of a river. The solution is right in front of us. We just need to stop and open our eyes to see it. Instead of letting stress and worries dominate our thoughts, we should remember that God's presence is the key to overcoming any adversity. It is that presence that can transform a desperate situation into an opportunity to grow and flourish, just as a flower would after receiving the necessary water. No matter how far you believe you are from God, His presence is always within reach. It is a constant reminder that you are never truly alone, even when the world seems to be against you. Imagine being in a garden surrounded by beautiful flowers. Each flower represents a blessing that God has placed in your life. Sometimes, we are so focused on the thorns that we do not realize the beauty that surrounds us. But if we take a moment to stop and appreciate His presence, we will see that, like a flower under the sun, our soul can flourish when it is under God's guidance. It is common to feel disconnected in such a hectic world, but that sense of emptiness is a sign that we need to turn our attention back to God. Just as a flower needs water to survive, our souls need God's presence to avoid withering under stress and worries. It is not necessary to wait until everything is calm to seek that connection. In the midst of chaos, God is present, waiting for us to allow Him to fill our hearts with His peace. It is in those moments of inner stillness, when we stop fighting against the current of life, that we can feel God's presence more strongly, reminding us that we are never truly alone. Just as a flower does not bloom overnight, our relationship with God also needs time and care. It is not just about seeking His presence in moments of desperation, but about maintaining a constant connection, day after day. Just as water is essential for a plant's life, God's presence is essential for our spiritual life. It is a daily reminder that no matter how difficult the circumstances, there is always hope and renewal in His love. By seeking His presence regularly, We ensure that our souls are always nourished and ready to face any challenge that life presents. You may feel lost in your problems, but God's presence is like a compass that always points north. No matter how chaotic the world around you may be, you can always trust that God will guide you in the right direction. It is in those moments of uncertainty that we most need to cling to that divine presence, knowing that, just as a flower seeks the light, our soul must also seek God's guidance. And when we do, we find not only comfort but also the strength to keep going, knowing that we are not alone on our journey. When we take the time to acknowledge God's presence, we also realize that all our worries and fears pale in comparison to His greatness. It is a constant reminder that, although the world is full of challenges, there is always a source of strength to which we can turn. Just as a flower leans towards the light to grow, our souls must also lean towards God to find renewal. It is in that constant presence where we find true peace, a peace that money or material achievements cannot provide. It is a gift that is always available. We just need to stop and receive it with gratitude. That connection with God not only provides us with comfort but also clarity. In the midst of life's confusion and noise, it is easy to lose sight of what really matters. But when we seek God's presence, we find the clarity we need to make wise decisions and live according to His will. It is as if that gentle breeze clears away the clouds of doubt and fear, allowing us to see the path more clearly. And when we follow that path, guided by God's light, we discover that our life blooms in ways we never could have imagined. It is a continuous process, a journey that leads us to a deeper relationship with the Creator, who is always present, ready to guide us. God's love is like a river that never runs dry, always flowing, always ready to fill our hearts with peace and renewal. Often, in the constant pursuit of success and recognition, we forget about this inexhaustible source of strength. It is easy to fall into the trap of believing that we can fill the inner void with worldly achievements, but we soon realize that something is still missing. In those moments, it is vital to stop and reflect, allowing God's love to flood our being. It is like opening a window in a dark room. The light enters and immediately transforms the environment, bringing hope and clarity. Divine guidance is not only a beacon in the storm, but also a loving hand that holds us when we feel lost. Imagine walking on an unknown path, with the fear of getting lost at any moment. Now, imagine a firm and secure hand taking yours, guiding you on the right path. That is the essence of God's love and guidance in our lives. No matter how confusing or difficult the situation is, we can always trust that God will show us the way. But to receive this guidance, we must be willing to pause, listen, and connect with Him amidst the daily chaos. God's love is not limited to moments of tranquility. It is most evident when we go through storms. It is easy to feel loved when everything is going well, but the true power of divine love manifests in moments of difficulty. When everything seems to be falling apart around us, that is when we most need to remember that God is with us, ready to hold us. It is in those moments when we must pause, breathe deeply, and allow His love to surround us. Like a warm blanket on a cold night, God's love wraps us, protecting us from the cold of fear and hopelessness. Sometimes, we seek love and validation in the wrong places, forgetting that the purest and truest love is already available to us. The world tells us that love is earned, that we must do something to deserve it. But God's love is unconditional. It does not require feats or achievements, just an open heart. It is important to remember this, especially when we feel insufficient or unworthy. God's love is a constant reminder that we are valuable just as we are, and that we can always turn to Him for comfort and direction. Like a lighthouse guiding ships in the dark, God's love is always present, illuminating our path. Life can be overwhelming, and it is in those moments when we most need God's guidance. We may not always understand His ways or why certain things happen, but we can trust that He always has a purpose. It is like being in the middle of a maze, not knowing which way to go, but trusting that the exit is there, and that God will lead us to it. That trust is what allows us to keep going, even when circumstances are challenging. God does not promise that the journey will be easy, but He does promise that He will never let us walk alone. His love and guidance are constant, and it is in them that we find the strength to face any obstacle. Throughout our lives, we face decisions that can change the course of our destiny. In those critical moments, it is essential to seek God's guidance. Imagine being at a crossroads, not knowing which way to take. Instead of relying solely on our judgment, we must remember that God sees beyond what we can see. His guidance protects us from impulsive decisions that could lead us down dangerous paths. By pausing, reflecting, and seeking His direction, we can be sure that we are making the right decision, one that will lead us to the peace and purpose that God has planned for us. It is easy to be carried away by the expectations of the world, seeking validation and success in places that, in the end, cannot fill our hearts. But God's love reminds us that we do not need to seek outside what we already have inside. His love is enough, and His guidance is clear if we are willing to listen. When we feel an emptiness, it is not because we lack something material, but because we have lost sight of what really matters. By turning our attention to God, we allow His love and guidance to fill us again, restoring the peace we so long for. There are moments in life when we feel we have lost our way, that we are wandering without a clear purpose. It is in those moments when God's love and guidance become more necessary than ever. It is no coincidence that in moments of greatest despair, we feel a force pushing us forward, giving us hope. That force is God's love, reminding us that, although the path is difficult, we are never truly lost. Like a spiritual GPS, God's guidance redirects us, places us back on the right path, and reminds us that there is always a way out, a new opportunity to start over. In a world where everything seems ephemeral, God's love is the only constant. Everything else may crumble, but His love remains firm. It is an anchor in the storm, a rock on which we can lean when everything else seems uncertain. This divine guidance and love not only support us in moments of crisis, but also provide us with a solid foundation on which to build our lives. No matter how many times we fall or how many times we stray from the path, we can always return to God's love, knowing that His guidance will lead us back to where we need to be. It is easy to get lost in the pursuit of things we believe will make us happy, only to realize that true joy comes from the connection with God. Riches, success, recognition, all are fleeting compared to the lasting satisfaction that comes from a deep relationship with the Creator. When we allow His love to guide us, we find a purpose greater than ourselves. It is not just about achieving earthly goals, but about aligning our lives with the divine purpose that God has for each of us. In doing so, we discover that true success is not measured in achievements, but in the peace and satisfaction that come from living in harmony with His will. God's love is not just an abstract concept. It is a tangible force that transforms lives. When we allow this love to enter our hearts, we experience a profound change. It is as if a light were turned on in the darkness, illuminating not only our path but also that of those around us. This love gives us the strength to overcome obstacles, the clarity to make difficult decisions, and the peace to face any situation with courage. But to experience all this, we must be willing to open our hearts and allow God to act in our lives. His love is the key to a full and meaningful life. No matter how far you believe you are from God, His love is always available, waiting for you to accept it. It is like a hidden treasure in plain sight, ready to be discovered. But to find it, we must stop searching in the wrong places and turn our attention to what really matters. When we do, we realize that everything we need, we already have: God's unconditional love and His constant guidance. This realization not only gives us peace, but also the confidence to face any challenge, knowing that we are never alone. The world tells us that we must fight for every bit of happiness, but God's love teaches us that true happiness is not obtained by force but by faith. It is in this trust in His love and guidance that we find the peace that the world cannot offer. It is not about what we achieve, but about who we trust. By placing our lives in God's hands, we find true freedom, a freedom that allows us to live without fear, knowing that we are being guided by a love that never fails. It is a continuous journey, one that leads us to a deeper relationship with God, where His love and guidance sustain us every step of the way. In the constant search for fulfillment, it is easy to fall into the trap of believing that success and material possessions are the keys to a full life. However, many have discovered that, even after reaching their most ambitious goals, the emptiness persists. This emptiness is not something that can be filled with worldly things, but it requires a deeper and more meaningful source. This is where God's love comes into play, offering satisfaction that money or recognition can never provide. Like a spring that never runs dry, God's love is the true key to a full and meaningful life. The world pushes us to seek fulfillment in the wrong places, promoting the idea that material success is the measure of a successful life. But how many times have we seen people who have it all still feel unsatisfied? This is because the inner void cannot be filled with external things. It is like trying to fill a glass with water when what it really needs is air to breathe. True fulfillment comes from a deep connection with God, who can fill that void with His love and purpose, offering us lasting peace that does not depend on external circumstances. It is common to confuse momentary happiness with true satisfaction, but there is a fundamental difference between the two. Happiness can be fleeting, depending on external factors such as success, money, or the approval of others. True satisfaction, on the other hand, is constant and is not affected by external circumstances. This satisfaction comes from knowing that we are living according to God's purpose for our lives, aligned with His will. It is a state of inner peace that remains, even in the midst of difficulties, because it is based on a source that never fails: God's unconditional love. When we pursue fulfillment in material things, it is easy to fall into an endless cycle of desire and frustration. There is always something more we want to achieve, something more we believe will make us happy. But this cycle only leads to more dissatisfaction because what we really long for is not found in the things of this world. God's love, however, is different. It is like a spring that flows constantly, offering a source of satisfaction that never runs dry. When we connect with this love, we discover that we do not need to keep chasing things that can never truly fill us. Throughout life, many seek in professional success or the accumulation of wealth the key to a full life. However, after reaching those goals, they often find themselves with an unexpected void. This void is a sign that we are looking in the wrong places. True fulfillment does not come from what we possess or achieve, but from who we are in relation to God. By focusing on building a solid relationship with Him, we find a satisfaction that transcends circumstances and provides us with a sense of purpose and peace that nothing else can offer. Imagine standing at the top of a mountain, having achieved all your goals, only to realize that the view is not as satisfying as you expected. This is what happens when we seek fulfillment in material things. We may achieve much, but there will always be a void that the things of the world cannot fill. That void can only be filled by God's love, who offers us fulfillment that is not based on what we have, but on who we are as His children. By accepting this love, we discover a source of peace and satisfaction that nothing in the world can match. It is important to recognize that success and possessions are not inherently bad, but they are not the key to true fulfillment. They can provide temporary comfort and security, but they cannot fill the void that only God can fill. When we depend on these things for our happiness, we are building our lives on an unstable foundation. Instead, by centering our lives on God, we find a solid foundation that supports us at all times. It is this connection with the divine that provides us with a sense of fulfillment that the world cannot offer, reminding us that true fulfillment comes from a relationship with God. Many people spend their entire lives searching for fulfillment in external things, only to realize in the end that none of it really matters. What matters most is our relationship with God, who is the source of all that is good in our lives. By cultivating this relationship, we find a satisfaction that does not depend on what we have or what we achieve. It is a satisfaction that comes from knowing that we are aligned with God's purpose for us, living a life that reflects His love and grace. This is the true source of fulfillment, one that cannot be taken away by external circumstances. Instead of seeking fulfillment in the wrong places, we should turn our attention to God, who is always willing to fill us with His love and purpose. It is like being thirsty and continuing to search for water in a desert when the true source is right in front of us. By connecting with God, we discover that everything we really need, we already have in Him. This fulfillment is deeper than any achievement or possession, because it is based on a relationship that never fails. It is a constant invitation to live a full life, not based on what we have, but on who we are as children of God. It is easy to get carried away by the world's expectations, believing that we must achieve certain milestones to be considered successful. In a world that values the material over the spiritual, it is easy to forget that true fulfillment does not come from what we possess, but from who we are in Christ. This knowledge frees us from the pressure to conform to the world's standards, allowing us to live a life that truly reflects God's love and grace. By centering our lives on this truth, we find a peace and satisfaction that cannot be found anywhere else. It is an invitation to live differently, to seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, knowing that everything else will be added. In a world where temporary promises and opinions change constantly, staying anchored in faith has become more crucial than ever. The distractions are countless, and it is easy to get carried away by others' approval or by the quick success promises that the world offers. However, those promises are like sandcastles, crumbling with the first wave of difficulties. God, on the other hand, offers promises that are eternal, that never fail, and that are always available to those who trust in Him. Staying firm in faith means remembering that, although the world changes, God's word remains forever. It is natural to feel tempted to seek validation in others, especially in a society that values public opinion so highly. But the truth is that others' approval is fleeting and often conditioned on what we do or say at a given moment. God, on the other hand, loves us unconditionally, regardless of our achievements or failures. His love does not depend on others' opinions, and His approval is the only one that really matters. By staying anchored in faith, we free ourselves from the need to please others and find true peace in knowing that we are already accepted and loved by God. In moments of doubt, when it seems that everything we have built is in danger of collapsing, that is when we most need to remember God's faithfulness. He never fails, and His promises are sure, even though the results are not always immediate or visible. Staying anchored in faith means trusting that God is working, even when we do not see it. It is like a seed planted in the ground. Although we do not see the growth immediately, we know that something is happening beneath the surface. That is the nature of faith, trusting in what is not seen and believing that God fulfills His promises in His due time. The pressure to conform to the world's expectations can be overwhelming, especially when it seems that everyone around us is following a different path. But faith reminds us that we are not called to follow the crowd, but to follow Christ. It is easy to feel isolated or misunderstood when we make decisions based on our faith, but God promises that we will never be alone. He is with us every step of the way, guiding and strengthening us. By staying anchored in faith, we find the courage to be different, to live according to divine principles, no matter what others may think. Faith is not just a refuge in times of difficulty, but a constant guide that leads us on the right path. It is tempting to deviate when things get tough, to seek quick solutions or easier paths. However, those paths often lead us away from God's purpose for our lives. Staying anchored in faith means resisting the temptation to take shortcuts and trusting that God's path, although sometimes longer or harder, is the only one that will lead us to true fulfillment. It is in this process of trust where our faith is strengthened and where we discover the depth of God's love and faithfulness. Faith can seem like an uphill battle, especially when we face challenges that seem insurmountable. But it is precisely in those moments when our faith has the opportunity to grow. Life is full of unexpected challenges, and at many times, we can feel overwhelmed by uncertainty and fear. It is natural that in those moments, we seek answers, wishing that our prayers would be answered immediately. However, faith teaches us that although we do not always receive what we ask for, God always has a better plan for us. It is in those moments of waiting and silence where we truly learn to trust in His wisdom and unconditional love. Like a sailor facing a storm, our anchor is the faith that God never abandons us, even when it seems that our prayers go unanswered. It is easy to feel discouraged when things do not turn out as we expected, but the key is to remember that God always sees the bigger picture, while we only see a part. When our prayers are not answered in the way we expected, it is because God has something better in store for us. It is as if we were asking for a glass of water without knowing that God has an entire spring waiting for us. By facing challenges with this perspective, we find the peace and strength necessary to keep going, trusting that the best is yet to come. The challenges of life make us question our faith, wondering why God allows us to go through difficult situations. However, it is important to remember that these challenges are opportunities to grow and strengthen our faith. God never gives us more than we can handle, and each test is an opportunity to depend more on Him and less on our own strength. Instead of seeing challenges as obstacles, we can see them as opportunities to experience God's power and faithfulness in a deeper way. It is in these moments of trial where our faith becomes more than words. It becomes a living force that sustains us. By trusting in His guidance and plan, we find a peace that the world cannot offer, a peace that allows us to face any challenge with courage and confidence. Many times, when we face difficulties, our first reaction is to try to solve everything on our own. But God invites us to lay our burdens at His feet, to trust that He is in control and that His plan is perfect. It is like carrying a heavy backpack and God telling us to leave it at His feet. By doing so, we discover that life becomes lighter, not because the challenges disappear, but because we no longer face them alone. With God by our side, we can walk confidently, knowing that, although the path is difficult, we are never truly alone. It is important to remember that times of testing are not a sign that God has abandoned us, but an opportunity to experience His presence in a deeper way. When everything is going well, it is easy to forget our need for God, but in moments of difficulty, His presence becomes even more evident. By facing challenges with an attitude of faith and trust, we discover that we are not only capable of overcoming difficulties, but also emerge stronger. It is as if God were using those moments to mold us and prepare us for something even greater. Every challenge we face is an opportunity to grow in our relationship with God. Instead of seeing problems as obstacles, we can see them as opportunities to draw closer to Him and depend more on His love and guidance. Sometimes, God allows us to go through difficulties to teach us lessons that we could not learn otherwise. It is like a teacher who, instead of giving us all the answers, guides us to find the solutions ourselves. By trusting in the process, we discover that God is always working for our good, even when we cannot see it immediately. Life is like a journey, and challenges are part of that journey. Sometimes the road is easy, and other times it is uphill, but we can always trust that God is with us every step of the way. By facing challenges with faith, we discover that every obstacle is an opportunity to grow and strengthen ourselves. No matter how difficult the situation is, we can be sure that God is working in our favor and that, in the end, everything will contribute to our good. It is this trust in His plan that allows us to face any challenge with courage and hope. In the midst of challenges, it is easy to focus on what is wrong and lose sight of what God is doing in our lives. But by remembering that God always has a plan and that His ways are perfect, we find the peace we need to keep going. It is like being in the middle of a storm but knowing that on the other side of the chaos, there is a clear sky waiting. By trusting in God, we discover that every challenge is an opportunity to see His power and faithfulness in a new way. This perspective gives us the strength to continue, knowing that with God by our side, there is no challenge we cannot overcome. Facing life's challenges with God's help means recognizing that we do not have all the answers, but that we serve a God who does. It is a posture of humility and trust, knowing that although we do not always understand the why, we can trust the who. God is faithful, and His promises never fail. By laying our worries at His feet, we find the peace that only He can give. This peace allows us to face any challenge with the assurance that, in the end, everything will be for our good and for the glory of God. Challenges are inevitable, but with God's help, we can face them with an attitude of hope and confidence. It is not about ignoring difficulties, but about facing them with the certainty that God is with us. It is like walking through a dark valley but with the confidence that on the other side, there is a sunrise waiting for us. By keeping our eyes on God and trusting in His plan, we discover that we are not only capable of overcoming challenges, but that we also grow and strengthen in the process. This is God's promise to us, that we will never be alone in our struggles, and that His help is always available. In the midst of adversity, faith becomes our anchor, keeping us steady when everything around us seems to be shaking. This faith allows us to see beyond the immediate circumstances and trust that God is working in our favor. By facing challenges with an attitude of faith and gratitude, we discover that we are not only capable of overcoming them, but that we also learn valuable lessons that prepare us for the future. God uses every challenge to mold us and strengthen us, and in the end, we can look back and see how His hand has guided us through every trial. God never leaves us to face life's challenges alone. His presence is constant, even in the darkest moments. By trusting in His guidance and love, we discover that there is no challenge we cannot overcome. This trust gives us the strength to keep going, knowing that God always has a plan and that, in the end, His will is always fulfilled. This is the hope that sustains us, the faith that anchors us, and the love that drives us to keep going, no matter how great the challenges are. With God by our side, there is nothing to fear because He is our refuge and our strength. This is the moment to make a real change, to leave behind the lies that have kept you trapped and embrace the truth that God has revealed to your heart. It is not easy, but remember that you are not alone on this journey. God is with you every step of the way, guiding you and strengthening you. Are you willing to trust Him and allow His love to transform your life? I encourage you to reflect on what you have learned today and take action. Talk to God, ask Him to show you His way and give you the strength to follow it. And as you do so, do not forget to share this message with others who also need to hear this truth. Together, we can help more people find the peace and fullness that only God can offer. If this message has touched your heart, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to continue receiving content that will help you grow in your faith. Do not let this be just another video you watch and forget. Make this experience a turning point in your spiritual life. And remember, the best is yet to come when you walk hand in hand with God.